I am Gretchen Andrew, and as part of my residency with Gazelle Art House's Gazelle.io, I'm doing a conversation series with women who make, remake, create, recreate reality in their own image, and in doing so, express a sort of inherent feminism, sometimes consciously, sometimes on purpose, sometimes just through the work itself. And the purpose of these conversations is to get to know some women that I really admire more, as well as share them with other people, and also explore shared themes in my work and in theirs. So today I've got Penny Slinger, who is a fabulous visual artist who's just done a huge project with Dior, and just today had some work come out with Blum and Poe's newsletter as part of their COVID electronic sharing of work. And I'm so happy that Penny is joining me today from where we both normally live in Los Angeles, even though I'm in Park City right now. So yeah, Penny, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thank you, Gretchen. Hello.
So why don't we start with you just giving a brief introduction to, I know it's so hard because you have such an extensive and long practice and body of work, but just start by sharing what it is that you're working on, a little bit about your background for people who might not have any connection to you yet.
Okay, well, I was born in England and I went to Chelsea College of Art in the 1960s. And at that time, I really developed my style and interests that were going to stretch over the rest of my lifetime and weave in and out with different themes. But at that time, I discovered surrealism through the work of Max Ernst and his collage books. And that was a revelation to me that one could use collage to really explore dreams and uncover the unconscious. And so I made a conscious decision at that time that I wanted to use these tools of surrealism to explore the feminine psyche, which I felt was a very undeveloped and unknown universe in the world of the plastic arts, really. So that became my center, and I used myself, other people too, but really focused on using myself as my main subject, thinking that the artists over time had used woman as the muse, but generally it was her seen through someone else's lens, and looking at the history of art, generally a male artist's lens. So I thought it was about time to sort of turn these tables and look at oneself. And if you're going to do that, then you have the opportunity to show not just the appearance, but what lies underneath. So throughout the scope of the 70s, I explored really my own psyche, most notably in a series of collage book Roma called An Exorcism, where I'm using an old derelict mansion house as the place to explore my own identity and uncover who am I. And so that was the work then, very much in a felt, although I didn't really claim to be a feminist at that time. And from there, I went on to discover Tantra, and that influenced and became a really important part in my own path of self-discovery. Then I moved to the Caribbean, and there I explored indigenous people, and my work took on a different complexion as I tried to communicate to a general audience rather than general fine art. Came back to California at the beginning of the 90s and worked a lot with the counterculture community there in doing performance art and videography, different fields weaving together, as I always have, many different media. Then moved to LA a couple of years ago, and currently I've been working on a series which goes back to using the central subject matter again, because
Can you say that one more time? You just broke up a second. You said you're going back to using yourself
as my subject matter again.
Okay, and now just say it as one sentence because of the way I'm editing this.
Then, since I've been here in LA, and in fact before that, I started on a new body of work entitled My Body, in which I'm trying to articulate my body of experience at this time in my life, confront head on this next bastion of feminism, which is ageism, and to express that I am, at this time in my life, just as relevant, if not more, than I always had to express that. And so that's really what we're doing nowadays, and using collage techniques, which I always have done in whichever medium I'm working in. Collage has been my approach to bringing.
Yeah, so you touched on so many themes that I want to get into more, maybe going chronologically. When you when you first started using yourself and your own body as a muse to, and your own experiences to explore the feminine unconscious, can you talk a little bit about the relationship between a very personal self-exploration and making something that was opening up what turned out to be a very universal feminine experience?
Well, looking up into, I felt that there were so many boxes that we were really confined into, and there was a general lack of recognition and acceptance of the full feminine package. You know, even in feminism, it seemed that they were not embracing the whole sensuality and sexuality, which is our birthright to have and own as much as for men. This objectification of women and become fully my own subject. And I felt, like I've always felt really, that if I went deeply enough, and if I was absolutely as ruthlessly honest as I could be, that I would be touching on things that were not just true to myself, but had an archetypal significance. And I did feel at that time that it wasn't just me, it was everyone who was really not being able, everyone in terms of women, not being able to fulfill their full potential as human beings, to really be that the kind of liberation that was happening in the 60s with the advent of things like the pill, which was allowing women to be much freer, that was also something which was helping to free men as much as women, because, you know, if we feel freer, there's a lot more freedom to go around, and that has a ripple effect. So I felt I was claiming lost territory, really, both in my own psyche and life and for women in general.
What do you think was more threatening to people, the sharing of your personal experience or your personal self, or the universal, especially in the 60s when you started this work, when the world was significantly less ready for it? Do you think that some of that reception was because of the threat of you, or also the threat of it being, it's sort of rippling in this insidious way, positively insidious, as we sometimes talk about?
Well, you know, I've never seen that much difference between the two. As I was trying to express just now, you know, I've kind of always treated myself as some kind of archetype, if you like, and that what I'm able to express, I'm expressing on my own behalf, but on behalf of a lot of the silent majority, shall we say, those who haven't got a voice and don't quite have the means to express it. So I felt by stepping up and stepping forward and using myself, you know, in a way so that I wouldn't be asking anyone else to do things that I wasn't prepared to do, I would do it myself and step up there and be as brave and bold as I could, so that I'd kind of create a precedent. And so that those were probably in the shadows, not able to come forward, would feel empowered and encouraged and much more without limitation once they saw that somebody could do that. And I think that's always been the kind of the path of a kind of a mythic figure or a heroine or something. You know, I will claim that kind of status just because, you know, I did it and I'm still doing it. And I thought it was important because it's, as I say, like that ripple effect. Once you set up some sort of standing wave of possibility, then it opens a door. And once that door is open, more doors can open from that. So I've never really distinguished that much between those things that I express that are intensely personal and that which becomes transpersonal because it's applicable to all of us. It all has different flavors, but it's much of the same kind of thing of, we're all human beings with the same mechanisms that work within us. So that kind of freeing opens up and frees and unties knots that have been there for a long time, often for generations of inherited repression.
I could definitely see that in some of our relationship. For those who don't know, we're neighbors. We have our studios near each other. And so I got the opportunity to spend a lot of time with Penny. And something I definitely notice is that you're my friend, you're my neighbor, you're my mentor, but you are this mythic figure. And that sometimes is like, there are moments where that's very, very present. And it's definitely like a power that's always there and is like quite interesting in a daily experience, which we've gotten the opportunity to be in each other's company, well, especially during quarantine, like every day for a couple of months. Can you talk a little bit more about the concept of the muse? And you talked about it through history and the way that you use yourself as a muse, but how have you seen that evolving culturally or in your own work?
Well, I think if we're going to say, I am going to say I'm my own muse, then as I was mentioning before, we can't afford to stay skin deep on that. It has to be about showing the inner workings and not just the surfaces. And this is why I was so attracted to surrealism and the tools that they had for delving into other parts of the psyche, looking at dreams, looking at the subconscious, looking at those things which are underneath the surface and often don't see the light of day. So for me, that acceptance of myself as a muse has been, now how can I use myself to kind of mirror and reflect all this complexity that we are as human beings, all the things that are not just visible, but invisible too. And so we're talking about not just our persona, but our psyches, and not just our psyches, but maybe our spirit and our soul and our identities, which are a huge bundle of energies which go way beyond how we just manifest in the world. And so that embracing of myself as a muse with that contract, if you like, I took on that responsibility to show a lot more than meets the eye. And I've continued to do that in different ways all my life and hope to keep doing that until my last breath.
And the your reconfiguring of the cultural expectations around the muse is one of the examples of subversion in your work. And subversion is something that we talk quite a lot about. In my work, I subvert these power structures within the art world most recently, or at least kind of like most notably at the moment. But maybe share some more of your feelings towards subversion and some work that you do in that space.
Yes, well, that's one of the reasons too that I've taken often my naked body rather than just myself to show. One, because the naked human female form has been a big carrier wave of energy throughout all of art from all cultures. And I wanted to use that because in our culture, often, when you see a naked woman, especially when I was growing up, it was generally in a more pornographic situation where that woman is there showing herself to then be an attractor for male energy that they can, get off on this. So I wanted to subvert that by even deliberately placing myself in men's magazines where men would be coming for that kind of titillation and show I'm not just this object. I'm a subject. I've got lots more going on in my consciousness than is just this skin that you're looking at here. So in that way, consciously and continually using the nakedness, and also because I wanted the idea of the naked truth, that there's nothing concealed here, where we're looking at something full frontal, but full frontal psyche, not just full frontal physical. So in that way, I try to do that. And then why I've loved the medium of collage is because you can bring together pieces of the real world, but put them in a kind of conjunction and a relationship that's disturbing and upsetting because it's not what you're used to. So when I use my mouthpieces, for instance, instance, and I use my own mouth, and then I put other things. I put an ear inside the mouth, or I put all kinds of different things that you would not expect, because we're so used to these images, but then when they're put together in a way which is unexpected, then it makes people jarred a little bit in their psyche. And in that jarring, you kind of open up a crack to look at things in a slightly different way than you'd looked at them before. So I think that's the job really of the artist, certainly if they're any kind of visionaries, to open up these cracks and to get people to look at something they've always seen, but look at it afresh with new eyes.
We've spoken before about, again, like you said, you work in installation, you work in video, you work in digital and analog photography, but mostly it's under the umbrella of collage because you're bringing these elements together. And I've seen your drawings and I've seen your paintings, especially from the time in your Caribbean, and you're an exceptionally skilled, when you, like, if you chose to be realistic renderer of the form of life, of female form, of people, the Aborigines. And I guess the power of choosing something like collage when you have literally every medium open to you is quite inspiring and quite interesting to me. So aside from juxtaposition and bringing these things together, what else draws you to collage?
Well, I like the immediacy and the fact that, well, say for instance, I'm very attracted to how things are texturally, you know, like the quality of skin, the feel of velvet, all of these things. And I can paint them or draw them, but to do that is kind of quite a long process to get to the level of finesse that I like, where you can really feel it. And with collage, you can take those ready-made elements and use them as pieces in your composition, ready-made. So it makes the process a lot quicker. And because I've always had such a huge backlog of inspiration, of things that I want to manifest, then, you know, the drawn out process is not one that I'm always looking for. I enjoy to have something where I can be much more immediate and spontaneous. And also I found that in terms of composition, collage allows you this arena where things can come in and move about and have a fluidity and play together. And then you find these magic moments where it gels, you know, and when it gels, it's like you've got this frozen moment. And hopefully that frozen moment is evocative of lots more moments that went before and after, but you've caught that moment. And that's what collage does. It's very stimulating for the imagination and for one's just natural intuitive sense of composition and sense of what goes together. So I love it for that reason too.
And how do you feel that your work's reception has changed since the 60s, and the groundwork that you were laying in the 60s, the extent to which some of that's come to fruition, the extent to which it hasn't, and where you think we need to go for it to be fully or more fully understood today?
Well, you know, back then, some people got it, a lot of people didn't. And I think although there feels like there is more receptivity now, and things like the whole crucible of feminism has grown and developed since then. At that time, it was a much more militant kind of movement looking for equal rights for women, and I wasn't so directly involved, mainly because, as I say, I was interested in the sensual and sexual side, which was not something feminism was embracing at that point. So now there is a much broader base for that, so I can claim my right to be a feminist in that broader sense of the term. So I think we have that, and then I see a lot of work. Now that we have the new digital media tools, I would say collage is probably the most prevalent and widely used art form that we have, because think of things like Photoshop and think of movies that are made with green screen or blue screen. These are collage techniques where pieces are put together to create the final product. So it's become much more accessible on a very broad level. And that makes it both diluted, but also it makes it something that's more in the mainstream of people's consciousness, that they're going to see a lot more surreal images on a daily basis and a lot more collage of things put together. But then what counts is the intensity and the relevance of your vision and the depth of that to make it stand out then from the crowd of everyone else who is working with these tools now. So that in broad terms is a little taste of that.
And then what about the thematic receptivity of your work? It was extremely controversial in the 60s. It's still controversial today. But do you feel like the world is more ready for it, or the art world is more ready for it?
It would appear so, but you know, I don't take anything for granted. And every time I feel like things are opening up, then there are other things that don't seem to be. And you know, recently I had some work in a magazine, and the paper, the printers refused to print the imageries because they said that they were too controversial. So, you know, in a way, a lot of things maybe aren't changing. And perhaps too, I live in a more rarefied world where the people I associate with are much more open to these things. But if we look at the broader spectrum of humanity, I don't know, you know, maybe we're still quite a bit in the dark ages in a lot of places, but there has been a lot of growth. You know, we have now, you know, the feeling of gender fluidity, which was something I was promoting back in the 60s and 70s, is now much more accepted and understood. So, you know, there's definitely progress, but these things go in waves. So, you know, as much as something opens up, then you get a kind of backlash to that too. So I won't take any of this for granted.
Yes, absolutely. I guess then as a final thing, will you tell us more about your approach to ageism, especially within femininity, and the work that you're putting out into the world right now?
Yes, you know, I felt again with this approach that I've had, that beauty and magnetism, all of these things, it's not just skin deep. It's about who you are. And, you know, in an ideal framework, truth and beauty are very intertwined and are close bedfellows. But we've tended as a culture to sort of separate them and become much more entranced with surfaces and with how things look rather than how they intrinsically are. So that I know as a being, I was an attractive young woman, and I know that I am a beautiful older woman. I have deepened, not become less, in who I am as a being and what I have to offer to the world. And yet, in our society, we have generally a cult of youth, which is looking to the attractiveness of the youthful woman, not to an older woman. So that's why I felt it's so important to try and shift that, because if we don't assimilate as a culture the wisdom of our elders, especially that of the wise woman, we're going to stay collectively immature and make the kind of mistakes that we have been making as a whole civilization. And our only hope really is to absorb that wisdom of the deep feminine, which someone of my age and experience is an example of, and I can offer and share. And so I really appreciate any platform like this now here to be able to do that, because we need it. We collectively need this. And I've got a lot under my belt now, but I haven't become lesser. I've only become more enriched. And that's not generally how this is approached in our society.
And you elevate that through the same way or through similar methods that you used when you were younger, which is you use your body as the muse, the self-muse relationship. That relationship has only deepened, and you're inviting us to confront that, which is, it's really beautiful work. We'll link to it or something in this so you guys can see it. But yeah, I could talk to you forever. I'm so happy that I generally get to, and there's a lot here that I'm really excited to share with the community at Gazelle Art House, which, just for a little bit of background, indirectly, Penny has been manifesting this into my life because I met Penny, and then Penny introduced me to Derek, and the three of us were at Derek's dinner at Gazelle out in London. And then from there, like, this opportunity came about. So it's really special to have you as a mentor and in my artistic community, and to get to share this with with more people, because I think there's been a really receptive audience for this conversation series. You're my the last one I'm going to publish, and I think people have been building and understanding the theme. So I'm really, really happy with how this went. Thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank you, Gretchen. I appreciate it too.
And a formal part.